Here to discuss the weaponization of the FBI and the DOJ is someone who knows their tactics very well. Mike Davis was the former chief counsel to the Senate Judiciary Nominations Committee, advisor to Chairman Grassley, and former advisor to Supreme Court Justice Neil Gorsuch. Mike Davis, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
So how was the Biden administration involved in this raid on Mar-a-Lago? This just is a bombshell. That is, what an abuse of power.
Yeah, I mean, this is just more evidence that President Biden was directly involved. At the Article 3 project, back when this raid happened, we exposed that it was actually President Biden who had to waive President Trump's claim of executive privilege in order for Attorney General Merrick Garland to greenlight this unprecedented, unnecessary, and unlawful home raid. And they went to a biased magistrate judge down in Florida, this Bruce Reinhart, who had just recused from President Trump's civil lawsuit based upon Magistrate Judge Reinhart's clear judicial bias based upon a Facebook post where he was politically bashing Trump. So this was it was a raid to get Trump green-lighted by President Biden for it was a bogus pretext to go in and raid Mar-a-Lago. Former presidents are allowed to have their presidential records when they leave the White House, and that includes classified presidential records. That's why Congress gives former presidents, they get federally funded staff with security clearances, federally funded office space, federally funded secure office space called SCIFs, or secure compartmented information facilities. They also get Secret Service protection. It is allowed under the Presidential Records Act for presidents to have their presidential records. It is not allowed for former vice presidents to have their presidential records. And remember, during this time, Joe Biden, when he was vice president, and even when he was in the Senate, they found that he had stolen classified records from the Senate, from the Obama White House, in several different locations. And what did Merrick Garland do with these two different cases? Merrick Garland sent in an FBI home raid to go after Trump for records he was allowed to have under the Presidential Records Act, while Garland colluded with Biden, the Biden White House attorneys, and Biden's personal attorneys to cover up for months the fact that Biden had these records. And Garland didn't send the FBI to go get records for 4 rounds. Garland let Biden's attorneys do these searches. And it wasn't until Garland took political heat and was forced to appoint a special counsel, and then the FBI went in, that they found the 5th set of records. So this is clearly a coordinated hit between Biden and Garland to take out Trump.
Yeah, what do you think their end goal is? I mean, even if he was found guilty of this, if they were able to get him for it, constitutionally, he's still able to run for president, right?
Yeah, he's
What would be
absolutely
their end
able
goal?
to run. Their end goal is, I think there was 2 end goals. I think that they were trying to divert attention and deflect from Biden's own clear Espionage Act violations when he had stolen classified records from his time in the U.S. Senate and from his time as Obama's vice president. And I also think that they were trying to take out Trump politically, because I think Democrats fear Trump because they underestimated Trump in 2016, and Trump came from nowhere and beat Hillary Clinton in an epic upset victory.
Yeah, it's either they're afraid of him or this is just a grand act of revenge. I can't quite figure out which it is. But this has just gone on endlessly. Now, and look, I agree with, everybody says the same phrase, and we all mean it, which is nobody is above the law. So we want, if somebody's committed a crime, even if they are the former president of the United States, they should be held accountable for that. But as you mentioned, he's allowed to have these records. Can you clarify, was Trump's records, were those classified records held in a SCIF at Mar-a-Lago? Was there a SCIF at Mar-a-Lago?
Remember President Trump used Mar-a-Lago as an office when he was the president of the United States. It is very secure. These records, President Trump had these records when he during his time as president, when he left the presidency. These records never leaked until Garland sent in the FBI and the Biden Justice Department got their hands on these records, and then they started leaking. They never leaked before that. And I'll tell you my theory of why they did this, another reason besides deflecting from Biden's own legal problems and trying to interfere in the election, is I think the Democrats, Obama, Biden, Susan Rice, James Clapper, these Democrat political appointees in the intel community, I think they very much feared that President Trump had his declassified copy of the Crossfire hurricane records. And I think they feared that President Trump was going to release those publicly, which would blow open the Democrats on their Russian collusion hoax and how they weaponized the intel agencies and the FBI to go after political opponents.
Can you explain those to us a little bit?
Yeah, Crossfire Hurricane was authorized by by President Obama, and it was the predicate for the Russian collusion hoax. It was where they went after Trump and said that he was colluding with the Russians to interfere in the 2016 election, which is completely nonsense. It was actually the Obama intel apparatus, the Obama White House, that they cooked up they cooked up the Steele dossier and this Russian collusion hoax to take out Trump politically. They did it when he was a presidential candidate, and then they continued to do it when he was a sitting president of the United States.
Yeah, and by the way, then they kind of weaponize that all against all of us Americans by saying, oh, Russia was so involved, and now we got to start spying on everybody and censoring everybody on social media because they're all Russian bots. I mean, they weaponize this not just against Trump, but against the entire population under this guise of Russia has infiltrated our elections, ultimately. Okay, so let's just live in a world for a second that Trump is guilty. Okay, so let's say you've got or maybe not just Trump, but any former president, Biden, anybody, and they're guilty of a crime. How would they go about getting the former president, without it being political, without there being this? I mean, because you've got to be able to go after criminals, even if they are the former sitting president of the United States. So how do you do it in a way that doesn't give off this, oh, the administration was involved, it's political? I mean, what if it isn't political?
Well, if it's not political, of course, former presidents can be indicted, and of course, former presidents can go to jail for real crimes. They'd have an issue because Congress gives former presidents Secret Service protection for the rest of their lives. And so maybe Congress would have to pass a statute to eliminate the Secret Service protection for a former president who's been convicted of a felony and is going to go to prison. But I would say these allegations against Trump are completely bogus, and this is lawfare against President Trump, and it's on 5 different fronts. And I can go through those 5 different fronts. Number one, you have New York Attorney General Tish James, a Democrat, who brought fraud allegations, a fraud lawsuit against President Trump, and it's based upon a bogus legal theory. President Trump borrowed money from sophisticated Wall Street banks, and he paid back every dime of the money he owed to the banks, including interest. So these banks were out no money. So it is completely laughable for Tish James to allege somehow that President Trump committed fraud when all the banks got all their money back plus interest. But here we are. We have President Trump who has to go up to New York again this week, and the federal government, the New York government, the New York City government has to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on Secret Service and other security measures to get the president to go up there to respond to a deposition of Tish James in this bogus civil fraud lawsuit against Trump. That's number one. Number two, you have this Soros-funded Manhattan DA, Alvin Bragg, who is bringing this bogus legal theory against President Trump, that President Trump somehow committed an election law theory. I think it's election law. It wasn't in the indictment, but somehow President Trump committed a federal election law felony because President Trump settled a nuisance claim against Stormy Daniels in 2016 based upon an alleged affair from 2006. I don't know how that would be an election law felony. I don't know how that's not beyond the statute of limitations. Alvin Bragg, this Manhattan DA's office declined to prosecute this bogus legal theory at Alvin Bragg's urging. When Alvin Bragg worked for the New York Attorney General's office, the Manhattan U.S. Attorney declined to prosecute this bogus legal theory. The Federal Election Commission declined to prosecute this bogus legal theory. DA Alvin Bragg himself declined to prosecute this bogus legal theory. And then he had a couple people leave his office and unethically run to the press and write books, including former Assistant DA Mark Pomerantz. And so Alvin Bragg was taking heat from the left. And so what did he do? Back in December, Alvin Bragg colluded with the Biden Justice Department. He recruited Matthew Colangelo from the number three's office in the Biden Justice Department to resuscitate this zombie case against President Trump. And Alvin Bragg and Matthew Colangelo came up with this bogus indictment, the first indictment ever of a former president who happens to be a leading presidential candidate of the opposing party. So let's just be very clear here with what's going on with Bragg. Biden sent one of his political appointees to the Manhattan DA's office, to Bragg's office, to get Trump. And there's no question about that. That's indisputable. The third front where Democrats are going after Trump is down in Fulton County, Georgia. This Democrat DA down there, Fannie Willis, is looking at President Trump for the non-crime of objecting to a presidential election. It is specifically permitted by the Electoral Count Act of 1887 to object to presidential elections. It's also permitted by the First Amendment. It is only a crime to object to presidential elections in third world Marxist hellhole banana republics. And maybe that's where the Democrats are trying to take this country. If it were a crime to object to presidential elections, Democrats would be in prison for objecting to Republican presidential wins in 1969, 2001, 2005, 2017. And Jack Smith, Garland's hand-picked special counsel, is also looking at this bogus legal theory about objecting to a presidential election. Even if President Trump was mean, even if he twisted arms, even if he said go find votes, that is not a crime. That is allowed by the presidential election, the Electoral Count Act of 1887 and the First Amendment. If you're finding votes, that means that they were there, right? It doesn't mean go cook up votes or make up votes. It says he said go find votes. The fifth front is Jack Smith again. He's looking at the non-felony of a former president having presidential records and the office of former president, which is specifically allowed by the Presidential Records Act, which we talked about.
So that's So that's the classified. The fourth one is the classified documents. That's what you're talking about.
Yeah, those are four different Democrat prosecutors are looking at 5 different potential crimes, non-crimes against President Trump.
Yeah, they're just not quitting. They're really trying to throw spaghetti at the wall just to see what sticks against them. I mean, they've really tried everything. And at this point, all it's doing, it seems to be, is gaining base for Trump, not losing support. People are starting to see this as a witch hunt completely, and not just, oh, you want to take down a criminal because they legitimately committed a crime, but it's just you're trying anything to get this guy, to get rid of this guy. And it's just backfiring. It's incredible to watch. I can't believe this country has turned into this. Is there any sort of recourse that we, the American people, can have against all of these various different? I mean, this is, I think, an affront to the American people in a lot of ways. So is there anything we could do to just say, stop this nonsense?
Yeah, there are several things that the American people can do. Number one is the American people should rally behind President Trump. This is so much bigger than President Trump. This is so much bigger than one man or even the presidency. This is about our country. If we continue down this path, we're going to lose our country. The Democrats have crossed the Rubicon by indicting President Trump based upon these bogus charges by this Soros-funded prosecutor up in New York. And we cannot continue down this path. Americans also need to rally behind House Judiciary Committee Chairman Jim Jordan, who's also running the Weaponization Subcommittee. It is so important what Jim Jordan is doing right now to expose Democrats, Biden's politicized and weaponized justice system. This is unacceptable. And frankly, I always say this is not our parents' or our grandparents' Democrat Party. These are not liberals who love America and just disagree with conservatives on the best way to get there. These are leftists. These are Marxists. They hate America. They hate equality. They believe in equity. They hate free speech. They believe in censorship. They hate due process. They believe in Me Too and politicized and weaponized justice systems. This is unacceptable. But the problem is the only thing these radical Democrats, these leftists, these Marxists appreciate is power. So what we need to do is give these Democrats a healthy dose of their own medicine. So Republican state attorneys general, Republican DAs, Republican prosecutors around the country, there is no shortage of crimes by the Democrats, whether it's Joe Biden, Hunter Biden, James Biden, George Soros, the abortion industry, the trans ideology, zombies, BLM, Antifa. These Republican prosecutors around the country need to get creative and start going after these crimes, charge conspiracies, and give Democrats a healthy dose of their own medicine. And this is on real crimes, not the made up crimes by the Democrats.
Well, there's a lot I agree with you on, Mike. I don't know if I agree on that point. I don't think retaliation is the right way to gain the country back and to put us back on the right track. I think one side does have to be the bigger person and has to say, we're not going to do this. We're not going to devolve the country into this. We're not going to go down this path. You guys need to stop your nonsense, stop being childish, but we're not going to retaliate. And I think that's kind of how we got to this point, was just retaliation after retaliation after retaliation. I mean, we could look at this and say, well, Bill Clinton was eviscerated by the Republican Party over, a sex escapade, and so this is kind of a retaliation for that. And then there's, we could just keep escalating. Okay, we just lost you for a second there, Mike. But anyway, right, I don't necessarily agree with the retaliation aspect, if you want to respond to that.
Yeah, I mean, I generally want to agree with you. Unfortunately, I just don't think we're in that world anymore. I think too many Republicans want to take the high road, and I would say that two wrongs don't make it right, but it makes it even. And we're not dealing with traditional liberals who would appreciate fair play. We are dealing with leftists, and they only appreciate power. This is a one-way ratchet. It's been going on for 6 years. The Democrats never accepted that Donald Trump upset Hillary Clinton and won the presidency, and they've been trying to destroy him ever since, even before day one. They spied on his campaign. They even spied on him when he was the president of the United States. They impeached him twice. Now they're trying to indict him on 4 different bogus legal theories. They've sued him. Enough is enough. We have to take off the gloves, put on the brass knuckles, and punch back.
But it's not just Democrats that are going after Trump. It's Republicans too. I mean, there's a bunch of never Trump Republicans.
Yeah, I agree with you. There's the Uniparty in Washington, D.C., and a bunch of Trump deranged rhinos, and they hate Trump, right? And I get that. Look, we're not canonizing a saint when we're electing Donald Trump as the president. I get that. He's been in the public eye for 40 years. No one thinks that, he's Mike Pence and he's an angel. People know what they were getting when they elected Donald Trump back in 2016. And the Washington, D.C. establishment never accepted the will of the American people.
Yeah. Mike, where can people find you? You're so knowledgeable about all of this. It'd be great to hear more from you. So where can people see more or hear or read more?
I appreciate that very much. It's article3project.org, article3project.org, at article3project, at article3project on Getter, Twitter, Truth. And my personal, when I'm not kicked off of Twitter, it's at MRDDMIA, MRDDMIA. And thank you very much for having me on.
Thank you, Mike. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.